Vic Focal. I'll be with you just a few minutes. Today we're going to be talking about capitalism and socialism on Coffee with. Hey, good morning. I hope you're here. I hope you have your coffee. I know I have my coffee right here. I'm going to have a little. I want to welcome you to Coffee with Vic. This is the second video in a series of videos that we're going to be doing on capitalism and socialism. So many people have concerns about this. It's actually part of a 2020 campaign. Donald Trump has just basically said this country will never be a socialistic country. Well, we're going to provide Mr. Trump with some shocking news. So stay tuned as we go forward with this program on Coffee with Vic. So, what is capitalism again? I want to just take a minute and sort of outline this for you a little bit so you have a pretty good idea of what capitalism is all about. It began, way back around 1600. In fact, capitalism and socialism both began around 1600. That's how long they've been around. That's how long they've been antagonizing each other and complementing each other as a philosophy. But let's begin with capitalism, and we know that capitalism basically focuses on the attainment of wealth and owning that wealth, owning that capital, and doing that through sort of a market concept where you're investing and growing, and your primary goal is to increase wealth for the person who owns that wealth, the capital. It's like I have this capital investment, I invest it, I get wealthier, and then I invest it again, and I get wealthier again. And we know that they use other people out there for employees and to help them gain their wealth. So that's generally the gist of capitalism. Now, the kinds of jobs that are associated with capitalism, shouldn't be surprising to you. There's the financial institutions, the retailers, internet sales, restaurants, stores, things like that. High-tech companies, insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies, real estate companies, and professional industry people like lawyers and consultants and doctors. And that's just to name a few. I'm sure you could think of a lot more people and a lot more jobs that fall under the capitalistic philosophy. What is socialism? And socialism is really the equal distribution of wealth among others. In other words, all that income that comes in, you take that and you redistribute it out so that everyone benefits from that, and not just the person who owns the capital. Okay, it's sort of redistributed. And this helps the establishment of programs to help people who are in need, who don't have either the opportunity or the capability to get to a level of quality life. And it also, socialism also is sort of the provider or the thrust for development of laws to protect abuse of power. Because with capitalism, we found power became a problem and people were mistreated. So you have things like minimum wage and civil rights and union laws and things like this that are associated with capital or associated with socialism that sort of counteract the negative aspects of capitalism. And notice I didn't say capitalism in general, just the negative aspects of capitalism. So, kinds of jobs that you might consider socialistic, and this is where we want to wake President Trump up a little bit, and also some people who are supporting his perspective about not being socialistic. And we also want to sort of tell people who say, hey, we need to be totally socialistic to be guarded here. And you'll see why in a minute. But here are some jobs that are within we could consider socialist range. And that would be their primary focus of betterment of all citizens. Okay, so let's look at some of those jobs. Our government, the president of the United States job is socialistic. Remember, it's the equal distribution of wealth and not the central control of wealth that is important here. And they try to take this and rework it into different things like if the government has this, then the government would become capitalistic. But for some reason, that argument's couched in the idea about socialism. In other words, they'll take all your money and give it to everybody else. Uh, so, but generally speaking, right now, the way we operate in this country, the president, Congress, agencies, Supreme Court, federal judges, law enforcement, IRS, everybody associated with the government is a socialistic organization. They take money that is brought in by the collection of taxes from all people out there. They take that money, they look and see what's necessary to help the betterment of all citizens out there, and then they redistribute that money to programs and organizations and places that help do that, including their salaries. So even though the president doesn't take a salary, it's interesting. He is a socialist, and he takes that salary and gives it to whoever he thinks he would like to be improved. In many cases, the Department of Homeland Security, for example, he'll just give that salary that he was supposed to be paid to them. That's still a socialistic perspective, folks. You can't get away from that. That's what I find very interesting. But state governments are also socialistic in nature. They take in taxes and money from other sources that are collected from the public, generally to help operate. City authorities like police, fire authorities, city government, everybody is a socialistic organization. You have government assistance programs like Social Security, Medicare, child insurance assistance, and food stamps that come out of these different programs. So let's take a look at sort of a capitalistic view of wealth. Where is it? Where is the wealth in this country? If we have the government and organizations who collect taxes and redistribute them, and you have people who have businesses that are collecting money that are focused on making themselves and their businesses bigger and bigger and better and better. Like, Amazon started in a garage and is now one of the major corporations in the world. For example, there's a good example of self-generating wealth. They created a lot of jobs, okay, but they have also benefited from those jobs. So here's the interesting part in why capitalism gets a bad rap for the most part. And that is 84%, or the wealthiest 20% of America. This is a chart from 2013. Now, this is actually probably increased. In other words, the wealthiest 10% or so probably today of Americans own probably more than 84% of all the wealth in this country. Think about that. 20%. We have over 380 million people in this country. 20% of those people own all of the wealth. And that's probably a conservative. It's probably now only 10% of the the people own all of that wealth. So when you take a look at the rest of us out of that, the 80% or 90% of Americans, probably 95% of Americans, really, because uh, you see the poorest of the poor, you can't even see them in terms of wealth, how much wealth they have in our country. And the working poor, that would be those people who are working but fall below the poverty standard. Only 0.2% of the wealth in this country. And then for all that everybody professes, tax cuts and we're going to build up middle America. Middle America still only has about 4% of the wealth in this country. So that means just a few people, folks, very, very few people out of 380 million people have wealth. In other words, the amount of money necessary to have a quality of life. So we have to ask ourselves some questions, really, when we get down to this, and that is, what is the role of our government? So here it is. It's clear. This is the government's job description. If you want to put it in business terms, this is the government's job description. So let me have a drink of coffee before I read this. Okay, here we go. You ready? I hope the government people, I hope the president, I hope all of Congress, I hope all of the judicial system and everybody's watching this. The purpose of our federal government is actually established in the preamble of the Constitution, and it is to establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense and security of our country, promote the general welfare, and you notice I said general welfare, not specific, not the 20% group, general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves being basically all of America and everybody who we give birth to, who is going to follow us in our footsteps in perpetuity from now on. That's the job description, folks. So just to help you get a better understanding, I've highlighted a few key words in this preamble because I always found, like in mission statements as a consultant in mission statements and value statements, if I found the value-driven words within those statements, you can learn what kinds of behaviors have to happen for this to come to fruition. So these highlighted words I've found some synonyms for them so you can get a clearer picture. Justice, there's equity, there's fair share, right, the righteousness, being right, doing things the right way, tranquility, calm, peace, serene, common, the normal, acceptable standards for everyone, general, global, universal, overall, not specific, a few, global, universal, overall. Basically, generally speaking, means everything. Ourselves, each of us, all of us, every single one of us in America. And posterity is simply defined as that next generation. And that's who we work for, folks. As a public, as citizens of the United States, our government and us need to be concerned about this next generation and what's going to happen to them, because they will be the guardians of what we built to this point. Now, the problem I have is, does this chart you're looking at represent anything listed above, which we just talked about? which our government is tasked with providing for all of us, not just a few. Does that chart tell us that the government is doing their job? 20% of Americans own 84% of the wealth in this country, and that was in 2013. It's probably 10% of the wealth. And when you add upper class, the rich, so to speak, with the absolute wealthiest, then you get 95.7% of the rich people in the world own, the vast majority of wealth in this country. It's kind of staggering when you put it that way. But here's what we need you to understand, or what I am trying to help you understand, and what we as a country need to understand as citizens, and what our government needs to understand, and most particularly a president, whoever that is, a president, Congress, and the executive branch, the judicial branch, and the congressional branch all need to understand this. You can't pit capitalism against socialism. You can't say the country should be capitalistic or socialistic. You can't say the government needs to operate from a capitalistic or a socialistic perspective. That's not how we operate in America. It's literally not how we do it. It's not how we have done it since the beginning of our time as a country. I mean, we haven't been one or the other. Here's how we live today. Here's how we have generally lived our lives in America. It's a combination of capitalism and socialism, and it's worked extremely well up to this point. Up to now, we have been a country that everybody looked up to, wanted to come to, saw the opportunity within us, saw us as protecting them against the evil that's in the rest of the world. And we operate this way. We operate from a base of capitalism and socialism. So how do I know that? Well, just take a look at the kinds of business, or the kinds of capitalistic organizations that are out there: financial institutions, retail, high tech, insurance, pharmaceutical, all the things we mentioned earlier. Then go over here and look at the socialistic side of it: the nonprofit organizations, federal, state, and local governments operate from that perspective. Public schools, United Way, volunteer groups, United Way, Red Cross, Social Security, IRS, Medicare are all socialistic programs. They don't earn a profit. They collect money and redistribute wealth. These people collect money and try to continue to keep those businesses growing. Now, there's a benefit to both of these particular philosophies, and the benefit is when we integrate them. Here's, for example, some organizations that have a capitalistic structure in terms of their business, like hospitals, universities, medical research, security, energy companies, even climate change. We could add that down here. These companies, in fact, operate from a profit perspective, but they are subsidized and often funded by socialistic programs that help them provide services to everyone in this country, including people who can't afford it. If you want to buy a house in real estate and you don't have enough money to buy the house, you can't buy it. If you go to a hospital and you can't afford to be treated for a gunshot wound, you're still treated. They take you in. They don't reject you. They don't send you out the door and say, I'm sorry, you don't have enough money for this. So you see, we have been operating this way since the conception of our country. In fact, you can go back to the 1600s, and the world has been operating this way for many, many hundreds of years. And it has served its purpose. It's co-balancing. It's allowing the opportunity. You have to have some way of generating revenue to support socialistic programs. So these companies hire people, so taxes can be paid, so socialistic organizations can operate and are funded, and people don't do without here. So when you try to say we're making this a capitalistic or a socialistic country or government, you can't do that, folks. It's just not possible. It hasn't been possible. We have been the leading country in the world. People respect us, they turn to us, they model us in many cases because of the way we have behaved in the past. This is the way we behaved in the past. We weren't socialist or capitalist. We had a combination of all of this. That was our strength. So here's what made us a respected world leader up until now. And I'm telling you now, this is being challenged with our current president. Our government operated in a manner that upheld the charge based on the preamble of the Constitution. Parties recognize, the Republican, Democrats, Independents recognize that we have both socialism and capitalism at work in our country, and supported the need for the two philosophies to blend and operate as one concept. And that concept was democracy and freedom. The three branches of government respect the design of co equal checks and balances on the executive, congressional, and judicial system. Now, whatever you were trying to do when you cleaned this swamp, you do not want to mess with this as part of that cleanup. This is what has held us together. This is the glue that's kept us as a country that has not fallen apart. You start messing with this, you start messing with the teardown of the United States of America. This is the key thing that has made us great. Our government leaders recognize the need to simultaneously prosper while taking care of those in need and less prosperous. Why do you think people want to come to America? Why do they look at this as a country of opportunity? It's because they can come in here and get the help they need to get to where those capitalists are, and maybe earn enough to break down that distribution of wealth to a more even balance. Our leaders in the past felt the need to do this for our country, but also felt the need to encourage this binding cooperation between capitalism and socialism in other countries in order to promote freedom as a way of life. Freedom and democracy are a result of the combination of capitalism and socialism working in a cohesive manner with ethics and morality. It is our ability as a country and a government to look past our personal biases and look towards the greater good that has established us as a respected leader. That's our strength, folks. That's what got us to where we are. We're losing that rapidly. We need to refocus on this. We should be mad. We have lost our respected leadership role in the world, and we need to fight to change it. How do we do that? We should stop trying to establish our country as either a capitalistic or socialistic society. These concepts have never been separated in our history, and we need both to regain our respect and leadership in this world. We need to return ethics and morality back into capitalism and socialism. We need to use our power to generate wealth, to ensure that wealth focuses on ensuring justice, establishing peace and calm and tranquility in the world, creating a common good that everybody can benefit from. And maybe there is still variances in wealth and class, but it's not stark like it is now. And people begin to feel like they have the opportunity, and ensuring that all people have that opportunity, not just a few, each and every single person. And that's why socialistic programs that support education and things like that are so important, and why companies ought to be investing in those programs. Not only the government, but they ought to be investing. They ought to take a percentage of their profits and invest in this country's education. Then maybe they would have all of those high tech people they need right now that they can't seem to find. It's kind of like they're blind to this. And then from that you're building a better life for all, and all who are going to follow us. Very, very important for all of America, and actually all of the world. Then we regain our leadership. Then we become the respected country that everybody looks up to, everybody wants to come to for opportunity, everybody wants to model, so that they can have that sense of freedom and democracy and opportunity and growth and security and safety that a lot of the rest of the world doesn't have. In fact, since Donald Trump has come into office, this whole thing has been turned upside down. And consequently, we've seen the results. We've seen something like Brexit fall apart on us. We've seen things like division of races and rallies and fights. We've seen increases in killings and mass shootings around the world, and people pointing to our president, and whether you can't hold him responsible for this. I mean, you can't hold him responsible for a shoot in New Zealand, but you can hold him responsible for his words that people point to and say, hey, this is why, I think the most powerful guy in the world thinks this way. Must be something to it. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time to revert and get back to where we were, that made us a respected leader, where people seek opportunity and want to model us once again. So, those are my thoughts on capitalism, socialism. Those are things you cannot run away from. These are happening today and have been happening through history. So, if you're running for president, and Donald Trump, if you're watching, pay close attention. You have one opportunity to correct your life and this country, and this is it. And that's to accept the concept of a shared capitalistic, socialistic society that is comprehensively strong because of the strength created by the bond of those two philosophies, not the separation of them. Not one is better than the other. It is the synergy that comes out of the combined effort from those philosophies and those organizations that support those philosophies that make us a great country. So, if you're Bernie Sanders and Democrats, stop saying you want to be a socialistic country. If you're Donald Trump and the GOP, stop saying you want to be a capitalistic organization. You'll never be socialistic. Stop that. It's never been true. It's not going to be true in the future. It's too far along for you to stop it. You don't have enough to stop it. We need to get back and understand what we gain from that, the combination of that. And that is the important aspect of what's going on in the world. I hope this sinks into some people. I hope you understand the importance of looking at information and looking at facts and looking at how things really are, and don't pay attention to some guy standing at the podium screaming. Most importantly, screaming stuff that isn't true, just flat isn't true. And that is also true when you go to the other side of the aisle, the Democratic side, we need to make sure people understand that socialism and capitalism are not separate in this country. They're united. They're married. They're married for life. And there's no way we're going to change that. It's the way it's always been. It's a way it's always going to be, because that is too powerful for any single person or groups of people like Democrats and Republicans to change, because it impacts me. It impacts you. It impacts all your children, all the children they're going to have, and all your grandchildren. Okay? It's important we stop this stupid fighting and get to programs and philosophies and leaders who can take capitalism and socialism and maximize, who can put ethics and morality back in capitalism with the sole purpose of generating revenue to help everyone in this country and, in fact, the world. Okay, so I hope you take this information to light and take it to heart. I'd like you to visit my YouTube channel, and if you do visit, please subscribe. The link is here. I will put it in the description so you can go to it right away. And if you go there, please click that little bell right there so that it will provide you notifications when shows like this happen. We will continue more in this series, another video or two on capitalism and socialism and the impact they have in that arena. All right. This has been Coffee with Vic. We've been talking about capitalism and socialism, and it's an exciting adventure in the world, and one that most people haven't taken the time to really understand. So hopefully you have a better understanding of it. I'm Vic Vogel. Join me again for Coffee with Vic.